Jacob Hornberger, president of the Future of Freedom Foundation, and welcome to this week's Trump Watch, the show that keeps a watch on Donald Trump and examines and analyzes some of the measures that he has taken during the past week. And of course, the big thing in the news is the explosion at the White House between President Trump, Vice President Vance, and President Zelensky of Ukraine. And it's this episode that really says a lot about the system under which the American people now live, and modern day Americans have lived for many, many decades now. As you all know, I have maintained in the past that the problem we have in this country is not with respect to our leaders. It's not a matter of electing a better president, electing Trump over Harris or Biden or anybody else. The problem is the system under which we live. And that unless we get rid of this system, and there's various aspects of this system, we can never be actually living in a free society, which for me as a libertarian is the goal, to live in a free society. But as long as we live under, for example, a welfare state way of life, and a regulated, managed economy way of life, a drug war, a massive border police state now militarized, a empire, foreign empire of military bases, foreign interventionism, foreign crises, and at the root of all of this foreign mess is the national security state form of governmental structure, which replaced our founding governmental system of a limited government republic. We cannot be considered living in a free society. Now, it's possible that we can convince ourselves. I mean, that's what public schooling is all about. Government schooling is to indoctrinate people into believing, being convinced that they live in a free society. And that's really the malady that afflicts the American people, is that they're convinced, primarily because of this indoctrination and this propaganda, that they live in a free society. That's that, Lee Greenwood song, thank God I'm an American, because at least I know I'm free. I mean, when you're forced to say the Pledge of Allegiance for 18 years, that's powerful indoctrination. I'd be willing to bet that every single American knows the Pledge of Allegiance till the day he dies. There's no way to erase it from his mind, unless, I guess, dementia or Alzheimer's or something like that. That's how deep this indoctrination goes, with liberty and justice for all. So it's this system that's the problem, but we saw a manifestation of this system, at least with respect to the empire, the empire, military empire, national security state empire, foreign empire, there in that White House. Let me explain to you what I mean by this. That here in the United States, the president has not omnipotent powers, but pretty much close to omnipotent. He has the power to assassinate any American he wants, to torture any American he wants. He just orders his military intelligence forces to go round a particular person up, and all he's got to do is say national security or war on terrorism, terrorist, or whatever, and that's it. The Supreme Court has held that he's immune if he assassinates anybody, including Americans, that this is his job to protect national security, and nobody's going to second guess him. He's now issuing decree laws. That's what I call them, and that's what General Pinochet called them when he took over in Argentina. He would issue a decree, and that decree would automatically become law. There was still Congress was in session, but it was just either a rubber stamp or just ignored. That whatever Pinochet decreed was the law, and that's the way Trump is operating. I forget how many executive decrees he's issued. There are 75 or so. But he didn't go to Congress. I don't know of one instance where he's gone to Congress and say, would you enact this law? Abolishing the Department of Education, for example. I haven't seen that. Or USAID. He's never gone and said, I need a law to abolish this agency. And so he's just issuing decrees. And like you take taxation. He's able to raise taxes on the American people to any extent he wants. Now, not with income taxes. He is pretty much limited himself to sales taxes on imported goods, what are called tariffs. But he says, hey, I want to impose a 25% tax on goods that Americans buy from Mexico or Canada, or 10% tax on what they buy from China. And he does this through an executive decree, a decree law. That is now the law once he issues the decree. Now, he has to declare an emergency, but no big deal. He just says an emergency. I mean, he's done that with respect to the militarization of the border. I mean, we live in a society where the military is now controlling a large portion of America, the borderlands. The military's in charge down there. I mean, they're ultimately in charge. It's the militarization of the border. And if anybody thinks that, it's only the people in the borderlands that are going to be living under this military presence there, occupation, if you will, nonsense. That ultimately seeps through the power of the entire federal government. It's hard to exercise just partial, omnipotent, militarized power. But there are restrictions that he's complying with. Federal judges have issued injunctions against some of his decree laws, and he's complied with those. Now, if it gets to a point where he's going to ignore these judges, then you've got full omnipotent power. There's no constraints. We already know Congress isn't going to constrain him. It's Republican controlled. They're all cowed by Trump. But some federal judges are issuing injunctions, but if he starts ignoring them, and now that there's some right-wingers that are saying, let's impeach these judges, let's intimidate them, which brings to mind, of course, Franklin Roosevelt, where he was the one that revolutionized America's economic system, and where America became a welfare state and a regulated, managed economy. And when federal judges were declaring much of his socialist and fascist programs, and that's what they were, socialist and fascist programs, unconstitutional, Roosevelt came up with a court-packing scheme where he was going to pack the court with additional justices that were statists, that believed in socialism and fascism, as long as they're called freedom and free enterprise. Saving freedom and free enterprise. That's the way that Trump, that FDR justified his stuff. I mean, remember that famous decree law that Trump, that Freudian slip here, that FDR issued, making the ownership of gold coins and silver coins, no, just gold coins, illegal. He permitted people to continue owning silver coins. This had been the official money of the United States under the Constitution for more than 100 years. And here is FDR saying, I decree it's now a felony to do this, and I'm decreeing a paper money system. No constitutional change, which is what was required to change the system, the monetary system that the Constitution had established, and which had been our monetary system for more than 100 years. Gold coins and silver coins is the official money. You needed a constitutional amendment. But no, Roosevelt declares an emergency, Great Depression, economic emergency. I can issue decree laws, and I'm making it a felony for anybody to own what had been the official money of the United States under the Constitution for more than 100 years. It's phenomenal. So here's Trump issuing decree laws. So this is what it's a time-honored method by which people exercise dictatorial powers. You can look throughout history. This is what rulers have done. But here's the empire, okay? Let me set the stage here. When you've got an empire, the emperor is expecting servility among vassals and serfs. Now, when it comes to foreign affairs, there's no question but that Trump's powers are total, omnipotent, 100%. The Supreme Court's made it clear they're never going to declare anything he does in foreign affairs unconstitutional. So here's your emperor. And there's no question but that America's an empire. Statists hate when you point that out. But it's just like the British Empire. It's just like the French Empire, the Soviet Empire. America's an empire. And we have possessions, overseas lands. And then we have an empire of military bases. We have some 750, 800 military installations around the world in some 75, 80 countries. And this is like what the late Chalmers Johnson, whose work I highly recommend, his books and his articles, called an empire of bases. I think, in fact, there's even a title of one of his books with that title. But you have this giant empire where you have an emperor, and that's Trump. And Trump expects servility. He expects people to cater to him, to honor him, to express thanks for being a vassal state that's being protected by the American empire, by being a serf who is serving the empire. I mean, you see that today among conservatives. You see even among libertarians of, oh, I just want to serve you, Mr. Trump. I want to serve you. I want to be part of your administration. And I want to tell you how grateful I am for you and coming in and saving our country and making our country great again and making our country healthy again. And, oh, thank you, thank you, thank you. And that's what he wants to hear. He wants to hear thanks and gratitude. So here this guy, Zelensky, comes in, and Zelensky's convinced that he's an equal. He's going to come into the White House and act like he's an equal to Donald Trump and Vance, J.D. Vance, Vice President Vance, because I have no doubts that Biden has convinced, or did convince, Zelensky that he's an equal, that he's important, that he matters, and he doesn't matter. He's a vassal. He's a part of the empire. He's like a colony. Ukraine's like a colony, and colonies are expected to show servility and respect and honor to the emperor. And so he comes into the White House saying, oh, well, this is the way the cow's going to eat the cabbage, and Putin you can't trust, and Putin broke agreements, and all that. And he's talking to them like equals. Excuse me, but he is not an equal, not in the empire, okay, and not in the minds, as you could see, of J.D. Vance and Donald Trump, president and vice president. This is not your role, Zelensky. You don't come into the White House. You're not an equal. You're a servant of the empire. Let me give you an example of this. Okay, you may have seen the movie The Ten Commandments. This is my favorite movie of all time, okay? A great movie. I still don't understand how they parted the Red Sea in that movie. I mean, it was just incredible achievement to part the Red Sea. But there's a scene in the movie, and it's been a long time since I've seen the movie, but there's a scene in there where the Pharaoh, who's like the emperor, the Egyptian Pharaoh, is up on his throne, his wife is there, and he's got his princes and so forth. And it's a great big hall. And so the door opens to the hall, and Moses is coming in, because apparently Moses, his forces have defeated. Now, Moses is a prince of Egypt at this time. He doesn't realize who he really is at this point. And I think he's defeated Ethiopia in this war. That's the impression I got when I watched this movie many years ago. And so they announce, Ethiopia! And so in marches the king and queen of Ethiopia, if I recall correctly. And they reach the Pharaoh, and one of the Pharaoh's henchmen there says, bow to the Pharaoh. And the Pharaoh says, no, it's okay. They don't need to bow. Because they're defeated. They're like vassals. And so the king of Ethiopia nonetheless kneels and kisses the ring of the Pharaoh, which of course he loves. And then they bring this great big carpet out, and they put gold coins and silver coins, and they say, oh, there's ships out in the harbor filled with these coins. And what they were doing is paying tribute to the Pharaoh. This is what vassal states do. This is what servants do. They honor the emperor, the Pharaoh, with tribute. And this is what Trump needed to hear from Zelensky. What Zelensky should have done was come into the White House. Not, Trump clearly wanted half of the mineral rights, which is kind of weird. Here's this country totally devastated. I mean, they've lost countless troops, young people. The whole country's destroyed. It'll be, I don't know how many decades before they recover from this debacle. And Trump's there saying, I want tribute. I want half your mineral rights. Even though they had not loaned the money to Ukraine. That Biden had given this money, whether it's 180 billion or 300 billion, what Trump says, or whatever it is. It was a grant. It was a donation, quote, donation from the U.S. government to Ukraine in the form of armaments. There was never any indication that Ukraine owed this money back. It wasn't a loan. Nobody signed a note. But Trump, as the Pharaoh, as the emperor, I want tribute. And so I want your mineral rights, or half your mineral rights. Well, what Zelensky should have done from the standpoint of the Pharaoh, the emperor, he should have just said, I don't need to negotiate anything, Mr. Trump. Here's a deed to 100% of our mineral rights. Take them all, sir. Just like that Ethiopian king had flooded the Pharaoh with gold coins and silver coins and shipfuls of coins and stuff. That's what he should have done. And then he should have gotten down on his knee there in the White House with the cameras going, saying, Mr. Trump, thank you for being the president, for running for office, for making America great and making the world great. And I'm here. Give me your orders and I will carry them out. If he had done that and maybe even kissed Trump's ring, I don't have any doubts that Trump would have said, let me write you a check right here, right now, government check. But he comes in as an equal. Which it's not the thing he should have done, because now I think he's cost himself any support. I think the only way that he could win the support is if he were to apologize to Trump, tell how sorry he was, not to show the right respect for not wearing a suit to the White House. That was an obvious thing. You don't wear a T-shirt to the White House, okay? And Zelensky's over there wearing his military T-shirt to the White House, and he's called out on it by Trump. He's called out on it by Vance, if I recall correctly. I may be wrong on that, but there's a right-wing reporter that they let into the press conference that said, "Why don't you wear a suit?" And Zelensky should have apologized for that. He said, "I should have dressed up for you," see, because he's a vassal state. This is the way empires work. They've got to show servility to the emperor in the empire. The other interesting thing in this is that Trump is questioning the whole World War II, post-World War II paradigm of the Russians are coming. And that was the whole racket of hating Russia. The Soviets are coming. That was what justified the conversion of the U.S. government to a national security state. We had a limited government republic with a relatively small basic military force. Certainly not large enough to embroil itself in Europe's wars or Asia's wars. They were embroiled in the Mexican War, but that was a relatively small conflict compared to like World War I and World War II. But once you convert America to a national security state form of governmental structure, everything changes. Now we are living under omnipotent government, because there's no question but that the Pentagon and the CIA have the authority to assassinate anyone they want, to torture anyone they want, to detain anyone for the rest of their lives, life sentence without parole, without a trial. And so everything changes at this point. And it's all justified because Russia. Well, the first one who questioned that paradigm was John Kennedy. You see, and you don't see this in the mainstream press when everybody's up in arms because Trump is questioning the whole, anti-Russia paradigm that has been used to keep the national security state in high cotton for since at least 47, but really the end of World War II. And they're up in arms about it, and they say this is the first time this has ever happened. Well, it's not the first time it ever happened. They just conveniently forget about John Kennedy, because Kennedy questioned that whole paradigm. They don't like to think about the Kennedy assassination. They don't like to think about Kennedy in those terms, so they just airbrush what Kennedy did out of existence. But they can't airbrush that peace speech at American University. It's a remarkable speech where Kennedy says, essentially, the Cold War is over. I'm decreeing the Cold War over. And man, you think there wasn't panic in the national security establishment and the mainstream press, where there were a lot of assets of the national security establishment under Operation Mockingbird? They went ballistic. 1,000 times more ballistic than they are now, with Trump threatening to normalize relations with Russia. They went ballistic. Oh, Kennedy's he's a Neville Chamberlain, he's appeasing communists, he's naive, he's a womanizer, he's incompetent, he's a traitor, Russian agent. Same thing. And so it's kind of interesting when Trump, I thought, was raising the notion that what they had done to go after him. Remembering the first time he was president, that he was a Russian agent. Remember, 1 full year, if not more, of Robert Mueller, he's going to save us. And, because they were all convinced that Trump was an agent to the Russians, that Putin had hired him to run for president, and that he was going to sell out America to the Russians. And in fact, I think all that impeachment process for Trump supposedly being a Russian agent pushed Trump in a direction that he didn't want to go, where he was being anti-Russian too, to prove people, look, I'm not an agent of the Russians. I'm not an agent of the Russians. And so that's he goes and becomes sort of anti-Russian to satisfy them. I'm not what you're saying I am. And I find it fascinating that he brought this up because it clearly affected him. And why wouldn't it? I mean, it affected me to hear every day for over a year, Robert Mueller, he's going to save us. He's going to save us. And from the Democrats. And then, of course, Robert Mueller comes out with his infamous report that says, well, I'm sorry, I can't save you. There's no evidence of this. And oh my gosh, they were crestfallen, all the Democrats and stuff. So it's interesting that if Trump is able to accomplish this upheaval in American foreign policy and this racket, this really Cold War racket, that normalizing relations with Russia and restoring normalized relations and ending all the sanctions and trying to impoverish and decimate the Russian people, this would be a great thing. But at the same time, Trump needs to just get out of NATO, dismantle it, declare an end to this Cold War dinosaur, which was a precipitating cause of this conflict. I mean, the U.S. officials promised Russia, we will not expand eastward, knowing that Russia was concerned about that possibility because the U.S. is an aggressor nation. Look, they aggressed against Iraq. They invaded a country, destroyed a country that had never attacked the United States. And then, you've got Germany. Look at the death and destruction they've wreaked on Russia in the past. I mean, it's not surprising that Russia would be a little bit concerned about having German troops and German missiles along its borders. But they broke those words, broke those vows. People talk about, Zelensky talks about Putin breaking agreements and vows and so forth. Well, look what the U.S. did with NATO. They vowed not to expand NATO eastward, and that's exactly what they did until they got to Ukraine, and they knew what the result was going to be. It was the same result that what happened in '63 when the Soviets were putting missiles in Cuba, which they had a right to do. Cuba's an independent nation. And the U.S. says, oh, we're going to invade. And the Pentagon was exhorting Kennedy, you need to invade now to aggress against this country, just like Russia invaded Ukraine. You need to invade Cuba to stop those nuclear missiles from being done. Now, fortunately, Kennedy struck a deal which caused the missiles to be taken back, which angered the Pentagon and the CIA to no end. They called it appeasement. They called it the greatest defeat in U.S. history. And that, in my opinion, was the day when they decided we need to save America by getting rid of Kennedy. And then his peace speech at American University was just confirmation of that, where he said, from now on, we're going to live in peaceful harmony with the Soviet Union, which, of course, was Russia. And we can get along. We don't need to go to war against each other. We don't have to have this everlasting enmity. And so Trump is essentially, it looks like, moving in the direction that Kennedy was moving in, which angers the national security establishment and the mainstream press and the Western Europeans to no end. Now, let me talk about something else that Trump has done in the past week. He said that he signed an executive order, one of his executive decrees, making English the official language of the United States. Now, oh my gosh. I thought we had gotten rid of this English only thing. And then I read that 30 states have made English the official language of the United States. I mean, this is just incredible. I mean, that we have to put up with this nonsense every so often. English is the only language. Now, let me tell you, though, there is a silver lining here. There's always a silver lining in every cloud. At least Trump didn't make it a criminal offense to speak Spanish or any other foreign language. I mean, that's a silver lining. I think his executive decree limits it to somehow that government offices are not permitted to help people speak in a foreign language or provide documents in a foreign language, something like that. But at least it's not a criminal offense. I mean, look at FDR. When he made it illegal to own gold, he made it a felony offense to own gold coins, which had been the official money. So we can be grateful that Trump is not going to criminalize the speaking of Spanish or any other language. And, it's so nonsensical that Trump says, and the immigration control advocates say, oh, all these immigrants that come in speak Spanish are going to alter our culture. Didn't they think about that when they stole the entire northern half of Mexico? I mean, we often forget that. We stole the entire northern half of a country that speaks Spanish, including in my hometown of Laredo, Texas. This was part of Mexico that we stole. In fact, for many, I would say decades, but at least for many, many years, after the Laredo became part of the United States, the city council meetings were conducted in Spanish. Why wouldn't they? This was Mexico that suddenly one day is part of the United States. Well, why wouldn't they be speaking Spanish? And how would they learn English so quickly? English is a very difficult language. Now, we grow up with it and it seems easy, but from an outsider to learn English is extremely difficult. It's a very complex language, with all the tenses and so forth. And so the idea that people are going to suddenly learn English after you've taken them over, it's not going to work. I mean, suppose we start a new war with Mexico, which is very possible because the U.S., Trump is thinking about invading Mexico or bombing Mexico with this cartel nonsense. And I mean, how long would it be before all those people that live in Tamaulipas and Sonora and Zacatecas and the northern part of Mexico there? I think Zacatecas is part of the northern part. But in any event, how soon would they learn English? Well, in Laredo, where I grew up, when I was practicing law there, in the jury panels that would be summoned for jury duty, like 20% of the people couldn't speak English. This is how many, a century and a half or so after the Mexican War, they still couldn't speak English. Who cares? Nobody cared. A judge would say, thank you for coming in. He'd have them write their checks for jury service and he'd excuse them. Nobody cared. Who cares? We had a nanny growing up that lived with us in our house. She never spoke English. Never spoke. She was an American citizen. She had been born here. Her parents were illegal. They were working the fields and outside Houston. But she never learned English. Who cares? What difference does it make that people speak a foreign language? In fact, I did a survey a while back. I was in Laredo and I was in McDonald's and I walked around from table to table overhearing conversations, and like 80% of the conversations were in Spanish. Who cares? Why does Trump and the English first people get so obsessed about this? Now notice something important though. I guarantee you Trump's not going to be speaking English. Okay, when he refers to going to San Antonio or El Paso or Sacramento or San Francisco or Los Angeles, he's not going to speak English. I guarantee you. He's going to use the names of those cities. Okay, that's Spanish. Sacramento is Spanish for sacrament. And then you got St. Francis, and you got the Angels instead of Los Angeles, and the Pass instead of El Paso, and St. Anthony, and St. James instead of San Diego. He could change the names of all these cities. He's changed the Gulf of Mexico to Gulf of America. Why doesn't he change the names of these cities here in the United States? Just issue an executive decree, a decree law, change the names. He's not going to do that. He's going to continue speaking Spanish, and so is Vance, and so are the rest of these U.S. officials, including their border czar, Tom Homan. They're going to keep speaking Spanish when they refer to these cities. Hypocrisy. Now, there is one thing interesting about Mexico that I ought to mention here in the waning moments of this week's Trump Watch. And this is regarding the tribute that I was referring to. Now, Mexico is a vassal state. There's no question about it. They serve the United States. They know that. In fact, as the records have come out, the secret records about the CIA, it turns out the Mexican presidents have been agents of the CIA in the past. I don't think there's any evidence of AMLO or Claudia Sheinbaum. In fact, I know there's no evidence of her or him being agents of the CIA. But prior presidents, it turns out, and of course it takes many years to find this out by the time records are released, they were agents of the CIA. They understand their role. They're a vassal state. And Sheinbaum understands this too. It's fascinating that Trump is saying to one of his vassal states in the empire, because Mexico's one of these, you will do as I say. You will stop drugs from coming in. You will stop illegal immigrants from Mexico crossing the border. And Sheinbaum says, yes, sir, yes, sir. And so she agrees to send 10,000 Mexican troops to the border. And they're busting drug drug cartels there to please Trump so he doesn't punish a vassal state with a 25% tariff, which will decimate Mexico's economy. They depend on trade with the United States, which means as you impoverish the Mexican economy even more than it is, you induce more Mexicans to come over, which then Trump uses as an excuse to further militarize the border. But to avoid this, what's fascinating is what Sheinbaum has done. She's paid tribute to the emperor, to the pharaoh. She sent tribute to Trump. What was that tribute? No, it wasn't gold coins and silver coins like the Ethiopian king did with the pharaoh of Egypt. She sent people as tribute. She sent 29 drug war people, cartel leaders, including the guy that allegedly orchestrated the murder of Kiki Camarena, the DEA agent who was working in Mexico. Okay, the DEA is a U.S. agency, but he was working in Mexico because the DEA works in Mexico because Mexico's a vassal state. So they want Mexico to continue waging the war of drugs, which has decimated the country. I mean, it totally destroyed the country with cartels and the violence that come with cartels. The cartels came into existence because of drug criminalization. Okay, so she, in order to gain the approval of Trump to stop these terrorists that Trump has threatened for March 4th, she has said, I'm going to send you these 29 people, like tribute. Like, she said, here it is. And she didn't even do it through an extradition thing. She just dumped them over there, which, interestingly enough, if she had done it through extradition, they wouldn't be subject to the death penalty, but now they are. So it's like this gift to the emperor saying, I'm giving you these drug war defendants, including the guy that supposedly killed Kiki Camarena, a guy named Caro Quintero. And here's our tribute. And please don't put tariffs on us. Absolutely fascinating. But that's how empires work. And this is why I keep saying that the problem we face in this country is not Donald Trump. It's not Joe Biden. The problem is the system that modern day Americans, 20th century Americans, brought into existence and the 21st Americans continue to insist should stay in existence. A vast military intelligence establishment, a giant military intelligence empire, worldwide empire, a welfare state, a massive drug war, a massive border control system, massive militarization of a large part of American society. That's what people need to be questioning here. Not the specific things that Trump is doing on this area or that area, but the fact that he is part of this system that is so destructive and is really threatening to take our country down from within. I'm Jacob Hornberger, and this is this week's Trump Watch. I look forward to talking to you all next week.